semiotic analysis of language, culture and symbolic forms in the mythological discourse of Durga Puja. He went to head the Science and Liberal Arts Department at the National Institute of Design, where he worked from 2000 to 2004. While at NID, he worked on many design projects like the Khalsa Museum project, Anandpur Sahib as the head of research and senior consultant. He moved to the Doon School in 2004 and was the head of Department of English till 2015. At present, he teaches English literature across 4 boards, enjoys training boys in debating, and given a chance, enjoys retelling his grandmother's tales to his sons. I request our guest speakers,
Good day. I would like to, it's a wonderful session where we have a wide array of talent here. Let me begin by introducing our guest speakers, and then I'll promptly hand over the microphone to them. Let me begin with Dr. Usha Arki. She is a specialist in the Bharatanatyam tradition. Her passion was to study various forms of dance and styles, which led her to research these forms, particularly in the Tanjavur style. She was influenced into this tradition by her older sister, who herself is a danseuse. She is currently the Member Secretary of the Ministry of Culture for Intangible Cultural Heritage, under which we have oral tradition, narrative structures, etc. I'll read a bit briefly for her. She wanted to so become a performer, as her older sister was into Bharatanatyam and her parents wanted Usha to become a classical singer. But she chose to become an art consultant instead. As she says, I would watch my sister learn and perform in the very next room. One day her teacher saw me and offered to teach me dance for free. My parents consented to it as long as I did not perform on stage. And we'll ask her more about this later. Next to her is Mr. Yugal Joshi. Yugalji and I were talking a few minutes back, and he gave some very interesting information. He was born at Chulaghat, a border near China and Nepal. He did his engineering, chemical engineering from IIT Delhi. Went on to Singapore, where he wrote his first book, Singapore Water Story, which was based on the water crisis and the water struggles of Singapore. Went on to again write Creating Shared Values, which is about how Nestle factory grew up around, and the community around Moga grew up to appreciate the work which was being done by Nestle factory. And this is way after the corporate social responsibility concept actually has come into being. In fact, it is the bleeding edge now. And finally, we are talking about 2 key books here, which is Ram, The Soul of Time, and The Women Warriors of Indian History, where he discusses 10 women warriors. We'll talk about these books and his understanding of these characters as we go along. After Jugalji, we have Shatrujit. Shatrujit Nath. In fact, I spent the last 2 days reading his fantastic books, and I'm a great fan of children's fiction about the Vikramaditya Veer Gatha. Shatrujit's first book, however, was more of a spy thriller, which was very exciting. He's an armed forces child, and who grew up on a regular diet of Amar Chitra Katha and Chanda Mama, and I'm sure a lot of us grew up on that diet. His core idea, he has been a business journalist, and now he has moved into the realm of fiction. He does not want to rewrite myth or history, but he's walking that plank which falls between them. Taking off from that area, could I pose the first question to the panel? Would you like to carry on from there? I mean, what is your locus?
Yeah, for me, I think the important thing was that, as I told you, when I decided that I wanted to tell the story, I wanted to tell a story which was rooted in Indian mythology or Hindu mythology. I did not want to tell a story of Ram or Shiva or Krishna because I think those stories are fairly well known, and they've also been told by a lot of, there are a lot of contemporary retellings which have been nicely done, whether it's Ashok Bankar having done it or Amish or Krishna Uday Shankar. There are a lot of people who have done that. Instead, I wanted to actually take a character like Vikramaditya. Now, Vikramaditya is a fascinating character. To my mind, Indians have lost Vikramaditya as a king. We have forgotten, probably around the 60s, 70s, we knew Vikramaditya as a king. I think the current generation has completely lost, the generation hasn't lost it so much as Vikramaditya has lost himself to this generation. So I wanted to kind of recapture the glory of Vikramaditya and the Vikramaditya. There are just so many small legends and myths around them. Bind them all together and present them in a complete masala commercial fiction format. That was all.
In fact, you mentioned that to you, Vikramaditya is more of an Arthurian hero, with his Navaratna, like the group of round table characters. I'd move on next to the issue another issue which I think hinges on any author who works with mythology is what ma'am you rightly said is Auchitya. I mean, what is the balance? How far do you go in portrayal of a character, in depicting a character, in feeling a character, or in translating a character? I mean, all of us know that Rama existed, Sita existed, but Rama as on stage at that moment, how do you decide that? How do you come up with those concepts?
See, we do have the text to fall back on because there are visualizations, and there are classic visualizations, there are contemporary visualizations, fair enough. We can look at all of them and then create a character. If we're looking at dance or even in music for that matter, if we are singing about any particular character or deity or whatever. But as I always use the word, and as I said to you earlier in our discussion, the word औचित्य कितना उचित है कि हम इनको कैसे किस तरीके से दिखाएं. How much can we do and how much can we not do and how much should we not do? So falling back on the formats that already exist, you can contemporize the feelings, you can contemporize a lot of things that individual artists do. For example, recently we had this discussion on the Geet Govind, and we all know that Jayadeva's compositions in the Geet Govind, very sensuous, very romantic, and some of them can't even be performed on stage. Some of them are sung. Luckily they are in high flown Sanskrit, which many people don't even understand. So it's fair enough. But if you really understood that, no parents would want to sit with their children when that song is happening. None of the dancers' parents would ever want to enter the auditorium if she's going to do that. And no friends would want to stand by and see what she's doing. Now that is the kind of eroticism that is there in the composition. But if you really want to do it, I have seen Guru Kelucharan Mahapatra, one of our legendary gurus, who performed Geet Govind, and he did Priya Charushila. Many of the compositions I have seen when he did. I mean, he could portray Radha sitting there on the stage waiting for Krishna, completely madly in love, completely erotic, but it never looked ugly. It really bordered on that absolute, perfect, optimal look that beyond that probably wouldn't have looked good, and lesser than that wouldn't have made justice to it. Now that is the word optimal or Auchitya. How much can you do? Just because you're doing it on stage and you want to contemporize it, you won't take a bedsheet and lie down on the stage. You won't do certain things. That is how much far you can go and how much less can you do. I think that is individual. The individual has to decide it. When you're writing or you're performing or you're singing, how much can you twist the raga or how much can you change? Those notes are already given. If you're going to sing a raga, you've already been given those notes. If you're going to sing a Carnatic or a Hindustani raga, for example, I'm well versed in Carnatic music. If you have the notes for Rag Mohan, which is Mohana, which is Sari Gapa Dasa, I can't put a ni into it. I have to do only Sari Gapa Dasa. There is no ni in it and there is no ma in it. So I can't do that. But given this framework, there's a lot that I can do. And that itself, I think, we've still not been able to realize, because there's so much more that every artist thinks that they can do in every performance. The same artist can sing the same raga 4 times a day, all 4 will be 4 different interpretations. Because it's that time that they are interpreting it. If 4 dancers take the same composition and sing it, perform it in dance, you will get 4 different versions of the same thing. Krishna Ni Begene Baro, as sung by a Carnatic singer, will be very different from what Hariharan sang, but the composition is the same. It's the interpretation that has differed. You have the freedom to interpret anything the way you want, but how much and how good can you do it is your individual judgment and I think discernment more than anything.
You worked, your work on drama, and you must have come across this issue too. Because you're looking at drama from 4 different characters' point of view. So, how are you developing your drama, and how is it how is it different from the other dramas, and how is it similar to them?
Like what Doctor said, this Auchitya thing, you call it Auchitya, you call it Maryada, you call it Lakshman Rekha, it has 2 dimensions. The first dimension is that there are, as Tulsidas says, that there are thousands of Rama stories. Whosoever wants to sing Rama's story, he sings it his own way. So thousands of people have said Rama story in their own ways. So one is the character of Rama or other characters which has been distilled throughout the generation. So we have one aspect of Auchitya there. But another important aspect is that how that thing, that Rama character or other characters, even minor characters in Ramayana are much more interesting sometimes, because the larger characters, bigger characters we know very well. So how to make that thing contemporary? Perhaps that is the reason that when Tulsidas writes his Ramayana, he doesn't write or he doesn't translate Valmiki Sanskrit Ramayana into Awadhi. Similarly, whether it is Kamman Ramayana or Ramayana written in the Indonesia, they are different because their treatment has been different due to the Desh Kala Paristhiti. It is like we say, Sar Sar ko gahi rahe, thotha de udaye, but thothe ko udane mein bhi, we have to follow that Maryada. That the character which is there, that we cannot do many experiments with that. Okay, interpretation is different, why Rama has done that, or why 2 brothers, Vashishta and Agastya, why their treatment is so different, because both of them are entirely different characters, though born from same father, but because of different circumstances, because of the events, there is so much space to fill for a contemporary writer that he can fill those all voids with contemporary, their relevance, and how those characters we can utilize in modern times for our own benefit or social benefit.
Shatrajit, you span across multiple platforms. You're looking at history, you're looking at mythology. You have an Indra who is also talking about Kalidasa, and who is thinking how Kalidasa is a threat. So how do you span this, and how do you realize that where is the your Lakshman Rekha which you draw?
I'll just share something very interesting that happened. This was around the time when the first book in the series, that's Guardians of the Halahal, the first book in the series was on the verge of being published. And there was a sales meeting that my publisher had organized with his sales force. And I was supposed to share the whole story so that the sales force could understand what the story is about. Because it's not like Ramayana. Acha ye Ramayana hai, ye Mahabharata. Nahi, ye Ramayana nahi, Mahabharata nahi, kuch aur hai. So once I took them through the story, and to put it in a nutshell, this series Vikramaditya Veer Gatha is a 3-cornered battle between Devas, Asuras and mankind. And the center of the battle is Halahal, or the poison that came out of the Sagar Manthan or Samudra Manthan episode. So this is a battle between human beings, Devas and Asuras. And human beings are the good guys, because Vikramaditya is the hero and he's a human being. So technically, Devas and Asuras are the bad guys. Which means that Shukracharya, Hiranyaksha are bad, Indra, Brahaspati, Narad are bad. Now, that was all fine, and I had thought about this because I knew that at the end of the day we are talking about a Deva who's a bad guy. So how do you deal with this? During the sales conference, somebody, one of the sales people, he stood up and said, "Sir, aapka villain kaun hai?" Now I was anticipating this question and I said, इसमें असुर भी विलन है and और देव भी विलन है, लेकिन असुर भी विलन है. I'm trying to now soften the thing up a little because I'm a little worried. One guy sitting behind says, वो इंद्र है, वो कैरेक्टर इतना ठीक नहीं है. वो कैरेक्टर इंद्रा का जो है ना, वो वैसे भी वो इतना ठीक नहीं है, तो वो विलन होएगा तो भी चलेगा. What he was trying to say was, if you look at from the Vedas, Indra has actually fallen in hierarchy. The importance that was attached to Indra has fallen. So today, making Indra a villain is acceptable. What I also did very cleverly was that Shiva comes to Vikramaditya and says, "You have to protect this halahal for me. Promise me that you will protect it." Now Indra is coming and trying to take it. Now in the hierarchy of gods, Shiva is bigger than Indra. So I am safe. So Vikramaditya is fighting Indra. He is fighting a Deva, but he is fighting on behalf of a bigger god. So this is the kind of cheating that I have done to stay in that Maryada Auchitya space. But coming to that larger point, see, this is all epic fantasies have to be large and have to take lots of stories. It can't be, as Joshiji just now said, the problem with the Ramayana, and today we see it as a problem, the known characters have become a little boring. It's more exciting to look at Angad. It's more interesting to look at Vibhishan, for example. It's more interesting to look at Shurpanakha. Okay. Because Ram, Sita, Lakshman, hame malum hai. It's more interesting to look at Kaikai, even Mantara, even Dasharath. Okay. Similarly, when you're creating an epic, it can't only be about Vikramaditya. There have to be surround characters who can carry the entire epic forward. It's like carrying the Sanjeevani mountain. You know, you can't. If Hanuman had gone and plucked one herb and brought it, it would not be a sequence. The sequence works because he carries a mountain and brings it. So it's the same thing with an epic fantasy. The epic has to be large for it to work. So that's why I kind of straddle that.
I'll just carry that thought forward. Ma'am, you were talking about the Ayudhastra and the Vahanas being also portrayed as different episodes in a dance performance. You have created Vikram's sword as this magnum weapon. And so, Rama's bow and arrow, Hanuman's gada, and the episode of there are these multiple episodes in our mythological thing which go beyond the character. Sometimes the description of Brahmastra is so beautiful that you perhaps forget who is wielding it. How do you think that, when you imagine it, reimagine it for our readers, how do you go about doing that? With the help of research, what is the kind of data you mine?
See, in the world of audio-visual presentation like dance, it is very important. First of all, we worked on these concepts because we thought that we wanted to reintroduce to the next generation that these things also existed, but we use it in common language. My dream is that I have to make this book which is going to be Sanskrit Mera Dost Hai or Sanskrit My Friend, because we are using the words all the time. Graha Pravesh ho, Astra ho, Vahan ho. We are constantly using all these words, but they are not endeared to us because somewhere we've given it a kind of a fuddy-duddy, grandmom kind of a grandpop look, which we say, ye bahut hamare reach se bahar hai. And I don't want that for the younger generation. My whole interest was to get the next generation interested, to know in their own language, in their own methodology, what all this was about. It is very simple because many times I've seen, I mean, I'm from the south, but I've moved now to Delhi. Constantly in conversations, people say, "Are kya Brahmastra feka hai usne?" The word itself shows that this is an, an ammunition that, when thrown, can just demolish. So, what is that whole thing? Why was it made? What was the use of it? Can it be used twice a day? Can it be used once a day? What was the whole philosophy of that thing? So, trying to recreate this kind of a thing where the deity or the character is there, but everything that surrounds him also is as interesting to be told to audiences. So, for example, the Vahanas, when we talked about the Vahanas, we talked about Mushika Vahana, we'll say Hamsa Vahana, we say Garuda Vahana, Nandi Vahana. Nandi is existing in all Shiva Mahadev temples outside, he sits right there. So who is this Nandi? Why is he sitting outside the door like that and blocking the view of the deity when you're standing outside? What is he trying to guard there? Why does he have to sit on this bull and go? What is the energy that Shiva gets by sitting on the bull? What is his relationship with the bull? And then there was this beautiful composition that we came across in Tamil, where the devotee is requesting the bull and saying, "Look, I have come all the way, the temple is closed. And I can just see a little bit from here, but if you move half an inch, I'll be able to have full darshan. Will you please move a little bit? And can I just step inside there and have darshan?" This beautiful composition we found, which actually, and the bull is very adamant. Once it sits down, it sort of reclines like that. So the bull comes and sits there right in front and he says, "No, I'm not going to move. Sorry, I'm not moving." Then he says, "Please." "No, I'm not moving." And finally Shiva, who finds that this devotee of his is so sincere, he comes and tells the bull, "Look, can you just move a bit and let him see me?" He says, "Okay, I'll move if you say so, but remember that I am your first bhakt. After me only everybody else." It's a very cute and beautiful story of Nandanar. Nandanar being the devotee who comes to this temple, and there's a beautiful Nandanar Charitram which is written where he himself writes these songs. And we took that song and we showed the character of the bull, how adamant it can be and how it will only listen to its master and nobody else. So the characterization of the bull came across very beautifully through this composition. So the audiences sort of understood, okay, we see the bull running everywhere, but we don't actually go into it and see how does it sit, how does it recline, how does it keep its face. We don't look at all that. Similarly for the peacock, when we talk of Kartikeya or I don't know what you call him in the Murugan, I mean, if you look at him and the peacock, there is a quotation where a great lady, an old lady writes about Murugan, and she says that, "Thank God you found the peacock as your Vahana, because only you can control its pride." Because the peacock is a proud bird and only you could have sat on it and controlled that pride of the peacock. When we came to Vahana of Ganesha, and we said, "Mushika, it is so small. Why did he select an animal which is so small? In dance we show it like this, it's really tiny. And then this huge Ganesha with this big stomach of his, he sits on that, can it carry his weight? How can it go fast like that?" So Ganesha says, "Because I'm fat and I have such a big stomach, I can't get into all the crevices. It's only my Vahana which can take me there. Only it can get into all the crevices." So these kind of, the relationship between the Vahana and the deity, very interesting to relate. Similarly, we did something called Divya Pushpa, and this of course is a complete inspiration for me from Mother's book, which I read on spiritual significance of flowers, which I found in Aurovalley Ashram. And I said that every deity, she said, has a particular flower that is very priya to them. Why Kamal or lotus is priya to Lakshmi? Why does she sit on the lotus? Why is Parijata the favorite of Mahavishnu? Why is Shankha Pushpa, that beautiful pea flower, purplish color flower, why is it the favorite of Radha? And then when I started doing a little bit of research, there was a composition where Radha asks the flower, you know, this color, that blue that you have, this metallic, beautiful blue, did Krishna just take his color and put it on you and send it to me? Is that a message he's sending to me that I'm supposed to like this blue? And that's why when she goes to Yamuna Kund near Mathura to meet him, she wears a purple dress and goes. You know, it's a very beautiful composition. Many of these concepts that have come to us, of course, are the creative interpretations of great composers around the times, right from generations we have been reading them. I quoted a composition of Tyagaraja where he says, today we are talking in the 20th, 21st century, we talked about women empowerment. He talked about it in the 17th century, where he's written this beautiful Telugu composition called Ma Janaki, where he says it is Ma Janaki means our Janaki, Cheta Pattaga, because you held the hand. In our marriages, we hold the hand and then go around the fire. So because you held her hand and married her, you have become a Maharaja, otherwise you would not have been that. It is her power that you are. If she had wanted, she could have easily burnt Ravana by just looking at him. That is the power of Sita. But she said, no, let him. She wanted you to get the credit of vanquishing Rama and bringing her back. That is the power of Janaki, Ma Janaki, Cheta Pattaga, Maharaju. This beautiful composition was written in the 17th century. We are talking of women empowerment today.
Thank you so much. It was so wonderful. In fact, sometimes I wonder that the writers like us, we have very bad playing field. Natya Shastra, Drama and Nritya, like Bharat Muni says that Natya Shastra is the fifth Veda. So the text is taken from the Rig Veda, the song is taken from Sam Veda, the rhythm gestures has been taken from Yajur Veda, and the emotions are taken from Atharva Veda. So we cannot beat, dramatists or any dancer. But saying this, that the important thing, but the question was about the Brahmastra and other astras. But I think slowly, with due apologies to both the person sitting my left and right and many of the audiences and children especially, the moha of these astras, superior astras, I think even Tulsidas left that. In his time, it was finally Agastya Rishi's that Brahmastra or the final astra which he invoked and killed the Ravana. But otherwise, he fought with all normal weapons. Even Pushpak Vimana comes at the end of this story. So if something like that happened in 600 years ago, now I think our kids are, educated enough, and I think now the qualities like Rama's other qualities. I wonder many times that the Rama goes to jungle for 14 years, and this Sita abduction takes place in the last 1 year. So nobody wants to know, or nobody explores what Rama did in those 13 years. So that is a beautiful story, in those 13 years, going from a very agricultural Ayodhya civilization to very urban Lankan or Rakshasa civilization. This is also a very topic of discussion, that why all the time savages, barbarians, Thank you. So there are many things like in those 13 years, what Rama did, whether Rama did penance to attain those Brahmastra or bigger weapons, or he was playing with similar weapons which the Rakshasas has, or in those 13 years he showed his leadership skill, he organized the people, and many other aspects of Rama's story anybody can think of. What in my story I did, that I have shown the Rama's other side of that thing, his organization powers, how he educates people there, how he differentiates between the good and bad aspects of both the cultures, the biggest quality of his, how he tries to make bridge between three different civilizations. So I think slowly authors, they are going to puncture this balloon of big weapons. And in those days, if we really try to bring those stories here, and we now bring to, somehow show Ravana as Trump, then maybe we can somehow compare those Brahmastras with nuclear weapons and other things. Thank you.
I just, humble submission, but even today we are talking about Cupid's arrows. So we did present Pushpa Astra, which was created by Manmatha, and how every flower that he picked and he threw with the arrow on Rati, on his to-be wife, and he wants to see when I throw this arrow, will she feel confused about me? Will she look at me? And every flower had a significance that if I throw this flower, this is supposed to be the result for it. So we tried to analyze कि ये 5 अस्त्रों में अगर वो भेजे, पुष्पा अस्त्र भेजे, तो लड़की पटी जाएगी वैसे भी.
I'm going to use, I'm from Bombay, so I'm going to use Bollywood usage. Okay, in Bollywood they use the term when you go and say, when you're sitting and writing a script and all that, Bollywood में बोलता है hero का mounting होना मांगता है. Okay, I'm using Bollywood style, hero का mounting. I was thinking mounting, first time I thought क्या hero घोड़ा पे चढ़ेगा, क्या mounting what? Basically what you're saying is I want to mount the hero. Now a lot of these weapons are actually mounting devices. Okay, who is this rock star who can pick up this bow and break it? Ek shot mein you have established that this guy is the most powerful warrior under the sun. So a lot of these are actually devices. So today, and I completely agree with ma'am out here, we have forgotten Brahmastra, we have forgotten Pashupatastra. We are talking about Thor. I know I'm also wearing Thor, I'm a big superhero fan. Okay. We are talking about Thor and his hammer. What is it? We are essentially trying to prove that this guy is so strong, nobody else can lift Thor's hammer. We are talking about Captain America's shield. Okay, today's kids are fascinated about Captain America's shield. They are fascinated about Thor's hammer. They are fascinated about Wolverine's blades. But our Brahmastra has been forgotten. Because somewhere along the way we have forgotten to mount those Brahmastras. We have forgotten to show you how effective those weapons are. What does it mean to be a wielder of a Brahmastra? So I think there is a lot of relevance to that today. In essence, to, if nothing else, from merchandising point of view, I would, instead of buying Captain America's shield, I'd rather have kids buying Ram's Brahmastra or maybe my Hellfires for that matter.
Yeah. This conversation can go on, and we can spend evenings on it. But I'm sure the audience also want to ask some questions. So, could be yes, please.
Good afternoon. My question is actually for Mr. Shatrujit.
Yeah, I see a Deadpool there. Yeah.
So, given that you're a mythological writer, when you write your stuff, given Indians' sensitivity with religion, mythology, and divine characters,
That that limit. What is up to? How much liberty can I take? What is the creative liberty that I can take? What is the creative liberty that is acceptable to the reader or audience? Not only what I can take, I think I can take any liberty, but is it acceptable to you? Because ultimately I'm not writing this book for myself. Ma'am is not dancing for herself. We are doing that. The first reader of my book is me. The first audience for her dance is herself. But at the end of the day, you and people like you are going to evaluate and accept or reject. So obviously that is always there. How much should I push this envelope? How risky can I be? So when I said, when I gave you the example from Vikramaditya, the moment I realized that Vikramaditya is going to fight Indra, so a human being is going to fight with a Deva, which is essentially conflict zone from a cultural point of view. But why is he fighting? He's protecting to fight. He's fighting to protect a promise he gave a bigger god, a god who is bigger than Indra, that is Shiva. Now, if that becomes acceptable, the moment you look at it and say, "Arey, Vikramaditya is going to fight Indra," but he is going to fight Indra because Indra is doing something which Shiva would not agree. Now, Shiva is the bigger god, no? So, those are the kind of cheat things that you do. But yes, you have to keep in mind cultural sensibilities. Without that, anywhere, anything, whether it's not only mythology. How much do you show of violence? Okay, it could be a spy story. How much violence can you digest? Okay, how much eroticism can you digest? Those are that self-censorship has to happen anyway, irrespective of genre. More true with mythology. Yes.
I actually have one more question.
I just want to add to what you asked. every region, every audience, every age group, everybody has a kind of a sensitivity. What works in some part of India may not work in the other part. What works for a certain age group in that part of India may not work here. For example, an urban kid might, appreciate certain characterization of a hero, whereas a rural kid may not accept it. Somebody from the south may not accept it. So in the south itself, somebody from Bangalore may think, हाँ ठीक है यार, jeans पहन के आया hero तो क्या हुआ? Whereas in Tamil Nadu they may say, no, how can the hero wear jeans and come? So every aspect has to be taken care of. So there are the guidelines, and at the same time you have to keep in mind the sensitivities of who's watching it. At this, I can't sell you. I may be able to sell you a close-up toothpaste. I can't sell you some meswak dantamanjan. You'll say, no, I'm not interested. So the audience who's going to watch it, it caters to them. At the same time, we keep our sensitivities in place.
I think those who are for example, for ma'am, it's so much easier because she can do one version in Chennai and one in Bangalore. Unfortunately, we can't do those with the books. We can write only one book. I mean, if we had to write one for Chennai, one for Bangalore, one for Pune, one for Dehradun, me, my son, my daughter, the next generation will all be writing only that same book. So
I have one more question, please.
It's been raised a lot. What do you think about it? You could write 10 years back, depict something, but today people become intolerant to those who can really bring.
इस सवाल का जवाब मैं देता हूं और शुद्ध हिंदी में देने की कोशिश करता हूं। हम भुवनेश्वर, कोणार्क, इन मंदिरों में जो स्त्री और पुरुष के आपस के आत्मीय संबंधों की कहानी है, उससे अच्छी कहानी कहीं दुनिया में कही नहीं गई है। कंदराय महादेव का जो खजुराहो में मंदिर है, उसमें एक युवती खड़ी है एक युवक के साथ और बहुत प्यार से उसके गले में बाहें डाल रही है, अपनी चिबुक को थोड़ा सा ऊपर उठाती है और उसको किस करने की कोशिश करती है। यह चीज है हमारे देवालयों में। क्यों? ये इस प्रश्न का उत्तर इसलिए जानना जरूरी है कि आज अगर ऐसा कोई बनाएगा या किसी भगवान के मंदिर में ऐसी बात करेगा तो हम लोग इंटॉलरेंस और 50 किस्म की और बातें करेंगे। मुझे कई बार लगता है कि हमारे 100, 200, 300 साल के पूर्वज हम लोगों से ज्यादा उदार थे कई मायनों में। क्योंकि जैसे आप अगर कोणार्क में जाएं और कोणार्क में जो फेमस सन व्हील है उसको देखें, जिसमें कि 8 प्रहरों के हिसाब से वो बांटा गया है या 6 प्रहरों के हिसाब से, तो उसमें दिन दिन के जो यथोचित या मर्यादोचित कार्य हैं उन सबको डिपिक्ट किया गया है। यह मुझे बड़ा दुर्भाग्य इसका लगता है, जैसे शत्रुजीत जी ने भी बोला कि 1960-70 के बाद हम लोगों ने विक्रमादित्य को खो दिया, या हम लोग अपना वह पास्ट भूलते आए हैं जिसकी वजह से हमारे एक ही समाज में उर्वशी भी रहती थी, इंद्र भी रहता था जो 100 आंखों वाला काना राजा था, व्यभिचारी था, उसी में मर्यादा पुरुषोत्तम भी रहते हैं जो इंद्र की पूजा भी करते हैं, इंद्र की भर्त्सना भी करते हैं। उसी में रावण भी रहता है जिसके लिए शिव थोड़ा व्याकुल रहते हैं कि मैं रावण की तरफ थोड़ा ज्यादा जाऊं गणेश जी की वजह से, या मैं राम की तरफ को ज्यादा जाऊं क्योंकि वो मेरी अभ्यर्थना करते रहते हैं। तो इतने सारे उहापोहों वाले समाज के बावजूद हम उस संस्कृति को 2000, 3000, 4000 साल तक लेते आए हैं। ये बहुत ही दुर्भाग्य है कि हमारे जो, मुझे कभी बड़ा हैरानी होती है कि खजुराहो के जो चंदेल राजा थे वो इतने बड़े राजा भी नहीं थे, फिर भी उनकी दृष्टि बहुत व्यापक थी कि वो उसे समझ पाए कि यह सब हमारी संस्कृति का एक अंग है, जीवन का अनिवार्य अंग है। दुर्भाग्यवश हमारा जो पिछले कुछ सालों की या जो भी 100-200 सालों में मौजूदा राजनीतिक स्थिति बनी है, उसकी वजह से न तो बहुत उच्च स्तर के लोग इस बात को समझ पा रहे हैं कि उदारता में ही सबकी भलाई है, उदारता ही तरक्की का रास्ता है, न हम अपने बच्चों को ही सिखा पा रहे हैं। थैंक यू।
I also want to add to that, when we are talking of intolerance, sir, thank you for asking that. I've been quoting 17th century, 18th century all the time. My friends think that I'm stuck in the 18th century, but I want to go back to another composition, where Tyagaraja says that aren't there any elders in this village who can advise the youngsters not to stand in the corner of the roads and whistle at women. Now this is a composition, Evaraina Lera Pedula. I can translate it for anybody in Telugu. It is there online also, you can search for it. If a composition like this was written in the 17th century, I want to ask, what intolerance are we talking about? I mean, what are we actually trying to say? We were never intolerant. We are not intolerant even today. Today also we are allowing them to whistle there. We allowed them to whistle in the 17th century. We even in 17th century said don't whistle. Today also we are saying don't whistle. Where is the question of intolerance? I mean, why have we even to listen to something like that? We have asked so many questions in the past. We have compositions where a composer has said, you know, if you don't read the great philosophers of this country, you will not accumulate knowledge. It holds good even today. आज भी आप पढ़ेंगे नहीं तो आपके दिमाग के अंदर knowledge तो आने ही नहीं वाला. This is whatever we did then, even today it's holding good. Look at the forward thinking of our writers, look at the forward thinking of our composers, look at the forward thinking of our philosophers. They were so, I mean, they were completely intolerant and they were so forward thinking that even today we are finding relevance in what they said some centuries ago. I don't think there's even I think the whole topic is completely null and void according to me. Thank you.
I would like to add a couple of points here. Valmiki had this courage to say that Dasharatha has 353 wives, concubines, or all accumulated together. Yeah. Similarly, when, you know, Vanvasa, when Ram goes, there are so many conversations when Ram also feels, you know, is it a conspiracy between Kekai and Bharat? What Bharat was doing? Lakshmana says many things, which slowly, even I think at the time of Tulsidasa, to show a grander character or to show Rama something, you know, beyond the human being, he tried to temper that thing. In our old text, even from Bihari, Raskhan, anybody, the kind of poems we write, the kind of free flowing of your emotions is there, which unfortunately we are not doing today. I don't know why, but we are not doing today. But we have such a tremendous liberal past that it is very unfortunate that today, you know, writers like many writers don't take this courage to show that the past kings were lecherous or our gods were like that or this like that. This is very unfortunate.
The time ticks on and we have to close this session for the next to carry on. And it has been a fantastic conversation ranging from the Vedas to Bollywood masala, through Tyagaraja and Dasharatha's many wives, and thank goodness Rama had to deal with only two. So the conversation really is endless, and particularly, but I think the critical takeaway from this moment or from this conversation is that it is in retelling of the tales. It is in believing that we still carry with us the values of the past. It is in reiterating those values that we keep them alive. And we need to look for new modes of looking at it. We need to reinterpret and we need to rethink our cultural mores if we are to be relevant. It is only in our minds that we can be tolerant or intolerant. Those are categories we create. And as long as we believe on the right side, along with Rama and Vikramaditya and the rest, I'm sure we are in safe hands. Thank you so much for being a lovely audience, and thank you the organizers.
A big round of applause for Debashish too for doing what he's there.
Debashish, I just want to invite both of them and yourself to witness a very short performance that we want to present from a very young and talented, well-known dancer of India, Arupa Lahiri. We are presenting Ahalya. And you can see it has been composed, the lyrics have been composed by a young 22-year-old Sanskrit scholar from Bangalore. And it was amazing that we didn't rely on ancient texts but asked this young boy to rework on the script. And this is how we get our young resources, you know, celebrate our young resources. To treat them, to tell them how to take this forward, and he's done a magnificent job. When you hear the music, you will not believe that it is written today by a young writer. I request all of you to please stay back and watch this half an hour, and I'll introduce it to you all within a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for moderating this session. I request Mr. Raja Dogra from RD Constructions to present a memento to our guests. Dr. Usha Arki, Mr. Yugal Joshi, Mr. Shatrujit Nath, and our moderator, Mr. Devashish Chakrabarti. Traveled young Bharatnatyam dancer and is trained rigorously in the Guru Shishya Parampara under Srimati Chitra Veshwaran. Arupa is also known for her graceful dance and intelligent interpretations. She is also an MPhil in English literature and pursuing PhD scholar. Dance is her passion and profession, whereas literature is her solace.
You are straighten.
Namaskar, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to bring to you a short excerpt where we took up characters from Indian mythology and gave them to dancers and asked each of them to present a 25 to 30-minute piece on what their interpretation of that character was. And we've done a range of characters, right from Karna, where we had a male dancer present Karna and Kunti conversation. We did Draupadi, we did Surpanakha, we did Ravana, where Ravana was the hero and not the anti-hero, where we talked about how he was such a great scholar of the Vedas and how Shiva was, very pleased with him always. As part of those series, we did Ahalya. Ahalya, as we all know the character, was a character of great penance, was a patient character, was not treated rightly, and Indra was the culprit. So with all these stories in mind, we thought we'd bring an interpretation, and as I said, Arjun, the young writer, wrote the lyrics, but it was also based on Tagore's poetry on Ahalya, which is in Bengali, but we sort of adapted it in English. It is a total presentation of about 45 minutes. Today we'll only present the centerpiece, which I'll talk about. So Ahalya says, "I'm the daughter of Brahma, the one who has been created impeccably. My beauty is like the rippling water. I'm wedded to Gautama, and our life is in the sylvan, naturesque ashram without any discordance." Most of the times when we create characters, we try to sort of introduce them in the first few lines so that you know who he or she is and how they live and what they look like, etc. I am that woman who is blessed to be a Brahmagyani. I am as much intellectual as beautiful. So was my peace actually shattered the day that thousand-eyed Sachipati, or Indra as he is popularly known, came after the departure of my husband for his daily rituals in the guise of my husband? But Gautama went to the river. Ah, does this Sachipati think he has deluded me? She is a Brahmagyani. He thinks I'm as pretty as the flower at the tip of Manmada's arrows. I know who you are and what you're here for. No, I am married. Can I afford this? Despite confusions and refusals, I choose to experience this moment and accorded in the sensuous carnal pleasures, led to a curse from my husband. I froze, I became like stone. I simply closed and shut myself to the world around me. I stayed and looked within. My tapasya can only receive deliverance by the touch of Rama. What were your dreams, Ahalya, when you passed those long years as stone, rooted in earth and prayer, and ritual gone, sacred fire extinct in the dark, abandoned forest ashram? Like a newly woken princess, calm and pure, you stare amazed at the dawn world. The dew which moistened your stone at night shimmers now on your black, loosely flowing hair. Your gaze, your heart swings back from the past, traces its lost steps in a sudden rush. All around, your former knowledge of life returns, like first. Created dawn, you slowly rise from the blue sea of unforgetfulness. You stare entranced. The world too is speechless. Face to face, beside a sea of mystery none can cross, you know afresh what you've always known. When she turned back from stone to becoming human again. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting Ahalya by Arupa Lahiri.